On September 26, 2002, a ferry capsized off the West African coast. 1,863 people died, more than on the Titanic. Only 64 people survived. The vessel was certified for 536 passengers. That night, nearly 4 times that number were aboard. Yet most of the world never learned its name. This is the MV Le Joola, and the question is not just how it sank, but why no one stopped it from sailing. Casamance stretches along the southern edge of Senegal, separated from the rest of the country by the slender strip of the Gambia. For decades, this region has stood apart, cut off by geography, dense mangroves, and a border that forces every overland traveler to cross into another nation and back again. The journey from Ziguinchor, Casamance's largest city, to the capital Dakar is long, expensive, and uncertain. With roads often blocked by seasonal floods or the shadow of a simmering separatist conflict. For many, the land road is not just inconvenient, but nearly impossible. The Ferry Le Joola became more than a ship. It was the vital bridge for families, students, traders, and workers who needed to reach Dakar. Every week, hundreds of young people boarded with dreams of university, their suitcases packed for a life unavailable at home. Market women carried goods to sell in the capital, while fathers and mothers traveled for medical care or to visit relatives. The ferry's decks filled with laughter, worry, and hope, a floating extension of Casamance itself. For these communities, Le Joola was not a luxury. It was a lifeline, the only reliable link to the rest of Senegal when roads failed or violence flared. Every ticket sold was a promise that the country remained connected, no matter how distant the shore. Le Joola was built in Germany in 1990, a modern roll-on, roll-off ferry with a wide, open vehicle deck and ramps at both ends. The Senegalese government owned and operated the vessel, assigning it to the armed forces to maintain security on the vital Casamance to Dakar route. On paper, the ferry was certified to carry 536 passengers and 35 vehicles, a figure set by engineers who expected short, sheltered crossings, not long stretches through open Atlantic waters. The ship's design, common for ferries of its era, brought a hidden danger. If water ever made its way onto the vehicle deck, it could move freely from side to side, undermining stability and making capsizing possible in minutes. Safe operation depended on strict discipline, careful counting, even loading, and regular technical checks. But Le Joola's maintenance record was troubled. The ship spent nearly a year out of service for major engine repairs, only returning to the water in September 2002. Reports from the weeks before the disaster described lingering engine problems, leaks, and concerns about the condition of the hull and safety equipment. The vessel was cleared for public service with little time for thorough testing, a decision that left it exposed to risk. For the thousands who relied on it, trust in the ferry was a matter of necessity, not choice. By the mid-1990s, the Senegalese military had taken over operations of Le Joola, promising better oversight in a region shaped by conflict and uncertainty. Instead, the ferry's departures became exercises in routine risk. Overcrowding was no longer an emergency, but an expectation. On busy days, harvest season, and school holidays, families pressed forward and ticket agents struggled to keep pace. The official manifest became a formality. Hundreds boarded without tickets, slipping past overwhelmed staff, or simply paying cash to ride. Students, traders, and entire families crowded stairwells and corridors, spreading mats on vehicle ramps and sleeping in hallways. The ship, built for 536 people, routinely carried 3 or 4 times that number. Each crossing blurred the line between necessity and danger, but the system kept moving. Rules meant to protect passengers faded behind the pressure to serve a region with no other options. The safeguards that should have stood between life and loss had quietly failed, long before the storm ever appeared on the horizon. On September 26, 2002, Le Joola prepared to leave Ziguinchor on what should have been a routine overnight journey north to Dakar. The decks filled early, as families, traders, and students crowded every corridor and stairwell. Many of the young people were university-bound, their bags packed with books and hopes for a future beyond Casamance. By the time the last passengers rushed aboard, the ship carried far more than its official limit. Estimates put the total at nearly 1,900, almost 4 times the number for which Le Joola was designed. The official manifest listed only a fraction of those on board. Hundreds of travelers had slipped past any formal check, paying in cash, or simply joining the throng. The vehicle deck, meant for cars and trucks, was packed with goods for market, sacks of produce, and personal luggage stacked high. Some passengers settled onto mats between vehicles, others squeezed onto benches or found space in hallways. As dusk fell, the weight pressed down on every part of the vessel. The ferry's hull sat lower in the water than usual, its decks crowded not just with people, but with cargo piled well above safe limits. To the regulars, this scene felt ordinary. Overcrowding had become an accepted part of travel, and the promise of reaching Dakar outweighed any sense of danger. But beneath the routine, the risks multiplied. The ship's balance was already precarious before it ever met the open sea. For nearly 2,000 souls, the evening began with the familiar sounds of departure, engines rumbling, voices rising, the shoreline slipping away, unaware that the smallest error or sudden storm could turn routine into disaster. Late that night, as Le Joola pressed north along the coast of the Gambia, a storm swept in from the Atlantic. Winds rose without warning. Rain hammered the decks. Waves battered the overloaded hull, already sitting low in the water from the weight of nearly 1,900 people and their belongings. The ship, built for calm river crossings and certified for just 536 passengers, faced open ocean swells it was never meant to endure. Within minutes, disaster struck. A sudden roll sent passengers and cargo sliding across the decks. Water surged through open hatches onto the vehicle deck, where it pooled and shifted with each movement of the ship. On a roll-on, roll-off ferry like Le Joola, this free surface effect is deadly. The water, unchecked by bulkheads, rushed from side to side, robbing the vessel of its stability. The ferry heeled sharply to starboard. Then, in the darkness, it capsized. Hundreds were trapped inside as the ship flipped. Some managed to scramble onto the upturned hull, clinging to slippery metal in the rain. Others found themselves sealed in air pockets, listening to the desperate tapping of survivors trying to signal for help from beneath the surface. For hours, the overturned hull floated in the swells, a silent, inverted tomb. The storm raged on. No distress signal had been sent. No rescue ships appeared on the horizon. As dawn approached, the sea claimed Le Joola completely. The wreck, still upside down, slipped stern first beneath the waves, disappearing with nearly everyone still aboard. The storm triggered the final collapse, but it did not explain it. The seeds of catastrophe had been sown long before that night, in every decision that allowed the ferry to sail so dangerously, overloaded, and exposed. As the overturned hull of Le Joola drifted in the dark, hope faded with each passing hour. The official rescue effort, bound by distance and delay, would not reach the site until the next day. In that vacuum, it was local fishermen, men in wooden pirogues, who became the first and only lifeline. Guided by cries and the scattered sounds of survivors, they pulled people from the water and from air pockets trapped inside the wreck. These were not trained rescuers, but neighbors and strangers who refused to look away. By the time state forces arrived, nearly all who could be saved had already been found. Out of almost 1,900 souls, only 64 survived. The rest were lost to the sea, their lives cut short not just by the storm, but by the long hours when no rescue came. In the end, it was the community that answered the disaster, while the state's absence widened the tragedy. After the sea swallowed Le Joola, the shock gave way to demands for answers. 2 senior officials resigned, the Minister of Transport and the head of the Maritime Authority. But these departures offered little comfort to those left behind. The official inquiry laid out its findings in stark terms. The ferry was catastrophically overloaded, safety checks were ignored, and the decision to sail into a known storm sealed the fate of nearly 1,900 people. Yet, when it came to accountability, the process stopped short. No high-ranking official faced criminal charges. No one was jailed. For the families who lost children, parents, and whole generations, explanation without consequence felt like another wound. Their campaign for justice stretched on, from Senegalese courts to international petitions, demanding the wreck be raised and proper compensation paid. Years passed. The hull remained on the ocean floor, and many families waited, still seeking recognition, still fighting for the dignity of those lost. Today, ferries still link isolated regions across the world, often under the same silent risks. For the families of Le Joola, accountability remains elusive. Memory fades, but the loss endures. The true test is not remembering tragedy. It is refusing to ignore the warnings before the next one comes.